All right. So remember, being humble or reserved is a liability, unfortunately. Again, for most of us as collection workers, we love what we do. That's enough for us. But in not being celebratory of our wins, by not being clear and consistent in our value messaging, we are hiding and diminishing as a result our perceived value from the rest of people external to us. Also, no one is going to do it for you. The trumpeting of value, the sharing of good news, while you may think that your boss should be doing it, more often than not, they usually don't. So please toot your horn a little bit. Make sure you're sharing the wins, even in informal channels, and just get the message out there, even in an unofficial way, how much you are just kicking butt and bringing some real value to the organization. Next, people who don't know how to do your job won't understand its value. And that's probably a universal truth, not just for us as collection workers, but it is perhaps harder because the language we tend to use when we talk about our work is just not regular human comprehensible. So, thinking about it in more rudimentary terms or figuring out a way to translate it from collection worker language and doing some gentle education around it. I mean, I don't know what a tax accountant does. I have an idea that it must be valuable, um, but I could sure use some general language explanations in order to understand what it is that they do and then how to value it more. Also, sometimes telling isn't enough and you have to try showing. Especially for our work, I have found that showing and the visual is so much more impactful and requires less words than actually trying to tell someone. Also, there's a competition for resources. We don't typically like to play in these types of games, but that doesn't mean the game is not happening. So just be aware that unless you are in a total utopian organization where money is just not an issue, there's going to be at least some level of competition, and especially in the last decade or two, like some steep competition for resources. So you need to acknowledge that because you not acknowledging that is not helping you. Also, if you don't ask, you don't get. So if nobody knows what it is that you need, or if you're not asking the right person, if you're not figuring out a way to effectively communicate it, then you're not going to get it. You're definitely not going to get it. And then if you're not on top of mind now, you won't be top of mind when financial decisions are made. And so this is like one of the critical areas here of why it is important to communicate that value message year round, because you don't necessarily know when these conversations are happening, and you have more likely to have impact if you've been consistent in your messaging repeatedly versus just like once a year in an annual report, for example. So communicating that message frequently all year round, being consistent, being clear, translating that value, all of that is going to help when those crucial financial decisions start happening. Resources. So one of the resources we mentioned a little earlier, specific to income streams, there's advocacy resources from the American Alliance of Museums. And then there was the Museum Trends Watch 2020 report with the specific section on the financial sustainability. And then I have a couple other resources here, a couple of them that I assembled. One is posted resources for museums on how to identify and articulate value on Lucidia's Think Clearly blog. I also have a resource for archives. It's for how to convey the value of archives, available on the Archives Aware blog for SAA. And then there's a regional toolkit example from the Oregon Heritage Commission that is interesting to check out in terms of what local and regional advocacy can look like for your organization. There are a couple webinars, strategies for how to capture and communicate the value of collection work. Some of the content that we covered today is an update on this webinar, but if you are interested in the income streams aspect of it, so a bit more of the economics chat, then I encourage you to check out that webinar to get a bit more of that. And then if you are very interested in value and how people are talking about value, how they're getting value, deriving value from collections in the time of Corona is another good one to check out, where I was on a panel with Chris and Margot. So we've got some different insight, not just my own on that one. And then keeping in touch, we have a new website and email with the name change. So Rachel, RACHAEL at relicura.com. And just a thank you. I just wanted to thank you so much for attending.